Okay, here we go. The countdown. 3, 2, and 1, baby. Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is Rey Ordenez, and I'm joined by JonnyIce. Johnny, what's going on, my man?
Oh, just another Friday night, Raymond. Just another Friday night.
This is becoming our new thing.
This is turning into a thing. Plans on a Friday night. Plans on a Friday night. We now have the order of operations for a Friday night. Uber Eats, and then QT with Ray and our group of loyal listeners out there.
I like it. I like it. What kind of Uber Eats did you do tonight?
Shout out to the local Irish pub. Which one did I? Oh man. They're going to rescind our advertising dollars. I think is what's going to happen.
Man. You're killing me here.
Yeah. Well, let's just call it Piper's Kilt in Eastchester and hope that they pay up.
All right, folks, you heard it here. All right, so this is really exciting. We are now on episode 3. What kind of feedback did you get from last week's episode?
I've been shamelessly sending the link around person by person. There's no mass distribution going on here. We're strictly grassroots marketing. So we're getting good feedback. It's a balance of, wow, you guys have a great dynamic, and also, wow, this is a lot about the Mets. So
well, that's good. We're on brand.
Yeah, exactly.
That is good. Yeah, it's been awesome. I've been getting very, very similar feedback as well. And I don't know if you noticed, for the second week in a row, it seems like we throw out names from the past or maybe current, and something happens. Last week, it was Drew McIntyre, a WWE superstar / future left fielder for the New York Mets someday, according to JonnyIce. And he came down with COVID. So we got to be careful with who we mention this week. We're
throwing names out there into the atmosphere, and you're going to come back the following week. It's either good or bad. I will tell you one thing that was good though this week was Francisco Lindor. We talked about the trade late last week, and they introduced him to New York in his press conference earlier this week with Carrasco, Mr. Cookie. I thought it was great. I don't know if you had a chance to catch any part of the conference call. I watched, I'd say half or so of the conference call, and man, this is just smiling kid. I love it. Before he even hits the field, he's got the right personality, and makeup is a lot when you're coming to New York. So I thought it was awesome. And we're excited. I'm going to sound like him. Yeah. Just excited to be here. Happy to wear the orange and blue.
Yes, you are, my friend. But it got us thinking, right? So for folks wondering, like, okay, do you guys have an editorial calendar? Where do you come up with these episodes? I mean, episode number 3. It's not like we're flying a little bit by the seat of our pants, but with all the excitement from this offseason this year, with all the changes that the Mets are going through, I said to John, hey, no one talks about the offseason 95-96.
That's right. And this is an important offseason. Lots of names in there.
There's a reason why no one talks about it, right? But you're right, John. That's, it's.
We'll get to that.
But it's crazy when you think about, a lot of moves that didn't necessarily translate into immediate success. God knows the 96 Mets were not very good, but it was the beginning of a lot of the, let's call it the new era. And when I think about that generation, for lack of a better word, the 98 Mets, 99, 2000, a lot of the things that happened in 96, winter of 95 and 96, started to lay the foundation. You started to see the seeds of that success.
Yeah, and you're starting to see the names that are kind of more into our quote unquote modern, thinking, yes. Into our modern research and things like that. Because a lot of these names, when we dig way back, it's just kind of like you're pulling strings pulling straws, trying to figure out names that stick out to you. And then here it's like, wow, we have some pretty current. And then you realize current to us is within the last 15 years, which is also a little depressing, yes. But it's our, baseball contemporaries is all we could say.
Yes. So what do you say? We get at it. We look at the off season, but I think before we do that, we've got to really understand what was the state of the Mets going in to that off season.
Yeah, and I just did a quick little recap. Just
My
doing
producer in arms over here.
Yeah, well, I had teams. I had guys working in shifts, collating papers, lots of papers. So I just figured I'd take a look at the 1995 season and just see where we were. And then I saw, second in the NL East. Pretty good. At 69 and 75, 21 games behind the Atlanta Braves. So second is not always first runner up. But let's just say that.
I always remember, it's funny. I always remember saying, "Wait, we finished in second." See, it's the PR in me. You always think about, what is the angle?
And that might be our third name for the podcast is Positive Spin or something like that. I think we're gonna come up with a new one. But the team was unfortunately coached by Dallas Green, who we lost recently, so I can't speak ill of the dead. But rough tenure with the Mets. Attendance. See, I like to poke out these little tidbits to see. We have a passionate fan base. The Mets fan base is pretty diehard, and just to see where we were coming in, out of 95. 11th out of 14th in attendance in the National League. I feel that's got to say something about what the product was on the field.
Well, and don't forget this was the first year of the post strike too. 95, they only played, I think it was 144 games. And I think a lot of people were just plain out pissed, about the money grab that both sides took.
And shout out to the true fans of Montreal who are still pissed.
Yes. But
story for another time.
But Youppi is still alive and well. I see him at the Canadian games sometimes.
Oh, that's good to know. I was a little worried about Youppi. We saw him live and in person one time. Again, a story for another episode. Maybe we'll bring in one or two guests because that'll be a great episode. But yeah, we're coming into 95. We're Rico Brogna. I have to be honest, one of my favorite Mets. Second favorite first baseman all time on the Mets. We'll let you figure out who the first favorite all-time Mets first baseman was, and
it's not who you think.
Exactly. And he led the team with 22 home runs. So I always just like seeing who the team leaders. 29 saves for John Franco. I think I forget the time when John Franco was like this elite closer.
Yeah, definitely, Mr. Heartburn. What? He's a great example of the stats. Don't buy everything in the stats. I mean, he was a solid reliever. I'm not taking anything away from, especially. That's my closer of my childhood, essentially. But 29 saves, 30 saves, 40 saves. I think 90% of them were like heartburn induced.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one of the things I always remember. So I watched a lot of games with my grandfather and in his thick Spanish accent. And I love my grandfather. He's Peruvian, oh man, we'd go to work at 5 a.m. every day. And 7 o'clock at night, we would watch the Met games together. And whenever John Franco would come pitch, my grandfather, and if you'll remember, John Franco always came out to "Go Johnny, go." So my grandfather would say, carajo, go Johnny, go to the toilet. And
go back to Cincinnati.
So that is part of my, my John Franco connection. But anyhow, yes.
And I believe, I don't know if you were with me or not, but I went to the game where John Franco made his comeback after, I don't know, what felt like 2 years on the disabled list. And he struck out Andrew Jones with like the bases loaded or something to get out of the 7th or 8th inning.
Nice.
So there's your little fun fact.
There you go. Fun fact.
I was sitting in the loge, again, another candidate for name of this podcast having something to do with the Loge, and I just remember that vividly. Those were the days. The Loge,
I know I'm going to go down a left field pull here, but I remember going to a game with you, and we'll talk about the game someday. But for folks, the Loge seats were the best. That was always my favorite section. These seats were under the
we had covering.
Yes,
but
the mezzanine was above us.
The freaking pipe one game like busted in the middle of the game, so it starts leaking. The maintenance guy comes with his like ladder in the middle of like the game, and I was like, oh my god, welcome to Shea Stadium, ladies and gentlemen.
It was like something out of King of Queens or something episode where you're just sitting there and it's just us three in this row of probably 12, and the one seat with the leaky pipe on top of it is Ray's, and the guy just comes with his little toolbox and his plumber's butt, and he's just there cranking at the things.
Hey, I'm trying to watch a game over here. Jeez.
Down in front. So yeah, continuing on in 95, Bobby Jones led the team with 10
Bobby
wins.
Jones.
Bobby Jones was 10-10. If Jake, our buddy Jacob deGrom, feels like he's having a tough go of it, Bobby Jones 10-10 leading the team. And then what I was surprised about, because honestly, I didn't remember when Jason Isringhausen was actually like dominant. I remember about the hype. I remember about the decline and then his, rebirth as a closer. But Isringhausen was 9-2 with a 2.81 ERA in 95, which to me was super. It must have been exciting at the time.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Isringhausen, I remember that. I think at one point he went like 8-0 to start. Like he was a midseason call up, just was on fire. And I think that was part of why 96 was going to be, I don't want to say the year. We weren't going to win a championship, but there was just so much hope because Isringhausen comes in and you're hearing about Wilson and this guy Pulsifer, and if Isringhausen can go 8-0, 9-1, 9-2, man, these other guys are going to be great.
That's right, and it's like the positive spin on the 69 wins of 95. But hey, that's just with Isringhausen. What could happen in 96? And like the last little tidbit that I saw, always think of, and a common thread in this podcast or this specific episode is going to be about like speed. We're going to talk about Lance Johnson later, but Brett Butler traded him at the deadline for
a bag of balls
for literally a bag of balls. So this is funny. So Brett Butler was hitting .311 before he got traded with 21 stolen bases, which it's like, when was the last time anybody had more than 11 stolen bases for the Mets? Yeah. And I tried to look up the guys he was traded for. So, I mean, Dwight Mannies and Scott Hunter. Dwight Mannies, if you want to get somebody that's going to throw a 404 error when you try to Google him, that's Dwight Mannies. Okay. He might have turned into, he's probably managing a Whole Foods right now or something like that. And then
changed his name.
Yeah, that could be it. It's Dwight Manatee, and he works down there in Tampa Bay. and Scott Hunter, who is now, I believe, the director of minor league scouting for the Mariners. So he got something right.
Yeah, and the Mariners are good too. They got a good farm team. I think they have an outfielder by the name of Jared Kelenic. So hey.
No comment.
Not bitter.
No comment. Strike that from the record.
So we get to the off season knowing that there's a little bit of foundation going on. Our general manager is Joe McIlvaine. Joe McIlvaine, let me tell you, I have a Joe McIlvaine story. Did you know?
Let's hear it.
Well, even if you didn't want to know, I'm going to tell it to you. Joe McIlvaine was in my house.
In your house?
In my house. I know what you... Well, so...
Did he make it all the way in the door?
Of course he did. I mean, he had to pick up his daughter, but it's because hey, no. The commas matter, folks. This is why commas matter.
Insert the audio bed there.
Rewind. So my sister, went to school with Mary McIlvaine, who is Joe McIlvaine's little daughter. They had a play date, and Joe picked up Mary. I will be very honest with you. I'm always very honest with you, but I had no idea that it was Joe McIlvaine, because back then there was no internet, folks. All right, so you couldn't just Google people, and didn't really pay attention to press conferences. What probably should have given away was he was wearing a Mets windbreaker. That probably should have given away that he was important. I just thought he was a dad picking up his daughter.
I mean, it must have been nice to be front office then, to live in relative anonymity.
Yeah, exactly. And had I known it was Joe McIlvaine, I would have, hyped up my Little League credentials, Did you know that I was an all-star catcher for Mr. Colcuts, John?
I knew you were an all-star catcher. I did not know it was for Mr. Colcuts, because we can get Mr. Colcuts in on board. We know the son. We know the son of Mr. Colcuts.
The irony. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're ever in Yonkers, New York, on Yonkers Ave,
Mr. Colcuts, best in town. Shout out to Ronnie and Anthony.
That should net us a free chicken parm someday.
That's it.
Once we finally get to see each other in person.
At least a plastic vat of gravy, please.
All right. Fantastic. So anyways, that's my Joe McIlvaine story.
Well, and then fast forward a few years, and Ray and I were walking around the expansive Stu Leonard's. I don't know why, either hanging out or I don't know.
I worked there. I mean, give me that much. Jeez.
Well, you worked there, but I
was off the clock.
You were off the clock. You didn't, We were just going there for samples, and we're there in the produce. No, actually, no. We're by where the steaks, and Ray elbows me. You know who that is? You know who that is? Joe McIlvaine. You should go over there and ask him for an autograph. Little did I know that the guy was in his house with a Mets windbreaker on, and he didn't know who the hell he was. So that's putting a bow on that story, going full circle, as all of our stories do. Always go full circle.
Full circle, period, full stop.
Absolutely.
Let's get to the offseason.
Let's go to 1996 offseason. Here we go.
So here's my question. I posed this question on Twitter, but no one responded to me. So I guess that just speaks volumes for how engaging I am. But is it the 95, 96 offseason? Is it the 95 offseason? Or is it the 96 offseason? What is the proper terminology?
That's a great question. I would say it's the 96 offseason. The issue is, and what I ran into when I was doing the research, some of the moves happened in the winter of 95.
Right.
So you got to do a little extra work if you're going to host a podcast.
If we don't have an answer in time, to our viewers or listeners, please, someone help us out here.
Correct us, please.
There's our CTA, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So we get to the first move of the year. Pretty benign, if you will. Billy Spires gets released, gets granted his free agency. Billy Spires was a utility infielder who, did really well when he went to the Houston Astros after the Mets. So, he can write the next chapter in the Once I Left the Mets, I Did Really Well.
Yeah, that's a future podcast too. Let's not give too much away.
Okay, sorry. Yes.
That might have to be a 3-parter, but it's the who did better after they left the Mets.
Fernando Vina. So the first signing, though, do you want to take a guess? I know you did the research, but I mean,
I jumped to the first signing of importance, so I don't know if it's the first signing, but I went with Lance Johnson because that was my guy at the time.
Lance was, but it wasn't. On November 7th, 1995, the New York Mets signed Rick Reed.
Rick Reed.
Pitcher named Rick Reed.
And when I got to sign with New York in 96 and had Bobby Valentine in AAA, just something clicked. I don't know what it was. Something about this organization that just something clicked. And then in 97, I was fortunate enough to make the team.
And for those that don't know, Rick Reed was a key pitcher, key part of the rotation for the 99 Mets, the 2000 Mets, actually the late 90s.
He was a horse.
They called him the poor man's Greg Maddux, which I guess they called everyone the poor man's Greg Maddux. That's the second poor man Greg Maddux in our 3 episodes that we mentioned. But
not the true. Japanese one.
I loved Rick Reed. I mean, he was one of the most. You just knew he was going to win. It's crazy when he took the mound. There's that level of confidence. He wasn't going to strike out 15 a game. He wasn't a fireballer, but just a solid pitcher.
He was going to give you innings, and he was going to work his way out. And I loved that about him. That was the thing. You didn't worry about him. You'd be within 3 runs or whatever, let's say, and he's going to get you through 6 or 7 innings. Like no doubt.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is he didn't pitch for the Mets in 96. He spent the whole year in the minor leagues, which is probably part of the reason why he later made the roster. So
we talked about 96 being let's call it a turning point of some sorts. It's the beginning of the Bobby Valentine era, which we'll talk about later. But Bobby Valentine takes over in August of 96. Having spent the whole year with the Mets farm team, he just was really familiar with Rick Reed and a handful of other players that we're going to mention shortly. And those players made their mark in the late 90s.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how long Rick Reed was in the system. 96 seems like so long ago, but then the 99 2000 teams don't seem like so long ago, so it's always hard to connect the dots there.
Absolutely. Moving on, we get, Joe Orsulak, granted free agent. Joe Orsulak. I was actually really excited when the Mets signed him. Do you remember Joe Orsulak?
Yeah, was he with the Orioles before or after the Mets? I was a big thumbs down with Orsulak. Something about it. I don't know if it was too close to the Eddie Murray time period or what, but Joe Orsulak, I just...
Fair enough. Mets go on to sign some guy named Kevin Roberson, who I think is the name of our mailman here in Connecticut. Then we get to November 15th. This is one of my favorite signings. The New York Mets sign Luis Rivera as a free agent. John, why is this one of my favorite signings?
Luis Rivera goes way back. I don't know what.
Two reasons. One, and at the time, I remember this signing. Don't ask me why, but my grandfather, who I just talked about, his name is Luis Rivera. So I thought it was pretty awesome that Luis Rivera was going to be a New York Met, and my grandfather was going to have someone, and I'm going to be like, my favorite players, Luis Rivera. On top of that, of other notoriety for Luis Rivera and Rey Ordenez is that he moved on to play for the Houston Astros. In the spring of 96, my dad, we took a family trip to Disney World. And I think it was that spring. Yeah, the spring of 97, actually. Took a trip to Disney World. My dad took me to a spring training game. It was Astros and Dodgers. And so I'm 13, 14 years old, just trying to get autographs, right? I mean, and by the way, if you haven't gone to spring training, I highly recommend it. It's probably where you get the most access with people. But Luis Rivera signed my baseball. I still have that baseball. Do you know why I still have that baseball?
I must have something to do with your grandfather. That's all I could say.
No. So I, again, being 13, 14 years old, didn't really think about it. That baseball is signed by Hall of Famer Jeff Bagwell, Hall of Famer Craig Biggio, and Luis Rivera. So that ball that was probably worth a lot, having signed two signatures with two Hall of Famers, Luis Rivera may have brought that value down.
Well, we haven't brought up Ant yet in this episode, and Jeff Bagwell, an alumni of University of Hartford.
There you go.
Anthony's alma mater. You had Jeff Bagwell, Vin Baker, and Anthony T.
Where do you go from there? If you're listening, if you're from the University of Hartford and listening, we are open for sponsorships, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, please.
So, hey, that's random. But anyhow, so far, Rick Reed is the only notable name in these trades in this offseason. Fury of moves, though, really, it's interesting when you think about these little small moves.
Yeah, it looked like they were definitely trying to find something in the minor leagues. There's a lot of minor league talent getting tossed around. And digging deeper into them, none of them really became anything, which is really depressing.
It's a trend that has always seemed to haunt the New York Mets, ladies and gentlemen. But they go on to trade Jason Hakame and Alan McDeal to the Kansas City Royals. And I know you're probably like, who the frig cares, right? Well, I care, right? Hakame, this is an interesting move because Hakame was only 24 years old. He was left-handed. So trading a 24-year-old left-hander is even today is questionable. Back then it was even more questionable. But even though I think he was more of a classic, what do you call a quadruple A player? I mean, he was dominant in triple A. In 95, though, 5 starts with the Mets, went 0-4 with a 10.29 ERA. So props to my boy, Joe McIlvaine, for making the trade to get us Derek Wallace, who is another person that if you look at these old yearbooks, he was always in the wings. That's probably his claim to fame.
We're waiting for him to develop still to this day.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, keep going through our boy Joe Crawford, who's a lefty. Do you remember Joe Crawford?
I looked him up and I thought he ended up being someone because it's just such a generic name, but he played one season in the big leagues in 1997 and that was it. But I thought I was like, oh, this had to be a guy who was on the Red Sox and won 2 Cy Youngs. Did not happen. Is
interesting about Joe Crawford. If you really follow the transaction, I don't know if it's going to be on this page or not, but like he was picked up in the Rule 5 draft by the Red Sox. I think the Mets reacquired him. Then they lost him again, and then they got him. So anyhow, very random. Must have been a Bobby V guy. December 14th, the day that will live in infamy in New York Mets history, as we finally sign Lance Johnson. John, do you want to talk about Lance Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the more exciting free agent signings that I remember from that era, just because we're forever looking for these leadoff hitter guys. And, I'm going to bring it up later, but it's interesting how the game has evolved because, we're going to be talking here about triples and stolen bases, and the game is now all about launch angles and that exit velocity. Yeah. So, honestly, I prefer this small ball kind of game with, moving runners over, stolen bases, taking that extra bag. So this was a huge deal for us because you need a guy to set the table, especially in the National League. So coming from the American League, you definitely had high hopes for him.
Yeah, and I remember being, I remember when they signed him, and I was, I don't know. I didn't care because I didn't follow American League Baseball. And back then, yes, we had Sports Center, thank God. But, the game wasn't as much, access to out of market games like you have today. So I really didn't know much about Lance Johnson. I actually had to look it up again. I found the article when they signed him. He was 32 years old, got a 2-year deal, but in the 95 season, he led the American League in hits. So, interesting signing, one that, would be classified maybe as low risk when you think about a 2-year deal, but it paid in spades in 96, set the record, the New York Mets record for triples in a season, multiple stolen bases. I think I don't have it in front of me. 50. Was it 50? He said, okay. And I think he had like 22 triples. Is that, in the ballpark, 21?
Yeah,
22?
21, hitting 333. I mean,
he was a monster. And he was an all-star that year. And if I remember correctly, we'd have to look this up, but I believe in that all-star game in Philadelphia, he played the entire game.
And now tonight's starting lineup for the National League. Leading off from the New York Mets, center fielder Lance Johnson.
Lance Johnson leads the majors with 13 triples. Swings at the first pitch, slaps it to left. Bell comes on and can't get there. Skids to block it. Johnson speeds for second. Daring play. And in there safely.
Which, when you really think about it, the Mets finished in like 4th place in 96. He played the whole game. So there's that.
And the fun fact on Baseball Reference, they have that he got an NL MVP vote.
Oh,
so he actually got 7 points or whatever, tied with Todd Hundley for 18th in the MVP voting. But you know what? They were ahead of Dante Bichette, so that's all that matters.
That's really all that matters. But here's the thread. The other piece to the thread. So in many ways, Lance Johnson was a one year wonder. I mean, he did fall off the cliff in 97. Maybe the expectations were so high in 96. After that 96 season, he gets traded for Turk Wendell.
Oh, number 99.
Number 99, Mr. Also from Quinnipiac University, by the way. A fine school. Go Bobcats. We're going to figure out how we're going to plug Pace today. But
no, they're going to get paced. They're going to get paced because we take this podcast at our own pace. Yeah.
So there's that. It's interesting. Again, why this offseason starts to, lay the foundation in many ways for that little run in the late 90s. You don't sign Lance Johnson, you don't get Turk Wendell. So there's that.
I see. Fun fact: I did not know about the Turk Wendell piece. I should have taken it a step further, like I usually do. But I was just going to say, I knew about Lance Johnson from the old back of the baseball card thing. That's the only way I learned about players back then. I wasn't playing the video games, and I wasn't, there wasn't the internet as it is today. So back with baseball cards is how we learned about those guys.
So, moving on into the next day. So busy day, Mr. McIlvaine. The New York Mets make a huge deal. Huge. They get Pedro Martinez. Unbelievable. The New York Mets traded for. Oh, wait. Is it that? Wait, you're looking at me. Why are you looking at me like that?
I clicked the name 3 times and I was like, there's no way we lost the Pedro Martinez, did we? Yeah. We didn't mess that up, did we?
Thank God we did it.
Some guy named Pedro Martinez.
The Mets did make a lot of moves with Kansas City that year. Very interesting. Actually, the Mets and Kansas City, had this interesting relationship. Al Harrison, who was part of the, let's call it the trifecta of general managers, assistant general managers with the Mets. So it was Frank Cashin, Al Harrison, Joe McIlvaine. That was kind of the posse, if you will. But Al Harrison did some work with the Royals, and I don't know. They just hit it off, right, with moves. And so
it always seems to work out that way. They find each year, or like a 2-year period, they find that one team they like to make these deals with. And as Mets fans, we're like the one team that likes to rip them off over and over again. That's usually what it is.
So in 95, the Mets got backup catcher Brent Maine, who actually, had a walk-off hit. Again, random things that Ray remembers in 96, a walk-off win. I think it was like the first week of the season against, I want to say it was the Cardinals, could have been the Phillies. Extra inning game, gets a base hit. I think that was probably the only offensive success that Brent Maine had for the rest of the year. Your classic backup catcher.
Especially for the New York Mets. We have this parade of backup catchers that just
and it continues.
Yes, and it does continue.
Speaking of backup catchers, I guess acquiring Brent Maine gave them the opportunity to trade Kelly Stinnett, who also, I remember from the mid 90s. I think he may have even had another stint with the Mets later on before he retired. I guess I could click on his name. He did, right?
Yeah, he came back 2006. Around 2006, 2007. Kelly Stinnett came back to the Mets.
They always come back, ladies and gentlemen. They always come back. But in exchange, the Mets got Corey Lytle, who is no longer with us. Perished tragically in a plane crash. But
that was in 2006. Yeah, when he was I guess off season for the Yankees. A really crazy story there, but definitely died way too young.
Absolutely. Corey Lytle was he was a really, I thought he was a solid pitcher. He had showed glimpses when he was with the Mets. I think he pitched. Not the first Subway Series, because that's Malicki. It may have been the second game. If you remember Armando Reynoso. So maybe this is the 97 season. Armando Reynoso gets hit in the leg on like a sharp line drive, and Corey Lytle has to come in to, replace. And he pitched well that game, if I recall correctly. Or maybe he got lit up, but either way, he, was serviceable, and then, went on to the Phillies and went on to the Yankees. And
if you look at it, he had some years, 13 wins, 12 wins, 12 wins, 13 wins. So, you'll take that any day from what he was, a solid 3-4 starter.
Right.
So you definitely said to process that.
Yes. He was also way better than Steven Matz. If Steven Matz could give me 12 to 13 to 14 wins, all right, I'd be okay. But,
we're just looking for people who, as Art Howe would say, battle. That's all. We
have heat every single game on every single podcast on Steven Matz. But anyhow, beyond Kelly Stinnett, Aaron Ledesma, for some reason that name just it rings a bell. I think
there's another Ledesma that's out there.
Maybe that's what it is.
I think there's a more recent Ledesma out there.
Mets, we turned the calendar here, and we're in January 96, almost almost to the 15 years? No, 25 years. Are we 25 years?
25 years. Yep.
We are 25 years. Look at this. That's the hook, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking back 25 years. Welcome to the 25th anniversary of the 96 off season.
25 years ago.
Big blockbuster move. So while the Mets are making blockbuster moves today, getting superstars like Francisco Lindor, 25 years ago, we were getting superstars. I say that with jest. But the New York Mets acquired Bernard Gilkey for 3 minor leaguers, and Gilkey had a monster 96 season.
1-0 to Gilkey with 2 out in the 11th. Deep to left field. If it's fair, it's over. Put up the books. Mets win. Mets win. Gilkey's the hero. So Gilkey, who couldn't start because of the bad ankle, pinch hits a 3-run game-winning homer.
Oh, Gilkey hit that ball a ton. That ball went up into the green seats.
Yep, Gilkey was, I mean, he was a machine, and it's kind of crazy thinking about what Lance Johnson did and what Gilkey did, and just seeing how it didn't all come together. But again, trades and signings that actually worked out for the Mets, at least in that short term, which is incredible to me.
Yeah. So for those that don't know or don't remember, Bernard Gilkey was a well thought of outfielder, left fielder, had power, had speed, had a great arm, or solid arm. Shouldn't say great, but and he was always a solid player in St. Louis. Kind of fell out of favor. And in 96, he did his thing. He, provided pop, provided energy for the Mets. Great signing, or great acquisition. And then he just kind of fell off the face of the planet in 97, 98. We could not figure out. I've never seen a player, I shouldn't say I've never seen, but just flip so fast.
Yeah, literally the next year it went down. And I brought up the NL MVP voting before. This is incredible. Bernard Gilkey came in 14th in the NL MVP voting. So the Mets had 3 players in like the top 20 NL MVP voting, and they, were 20 games out of first place. So be it as it may.
That's because the Braves were that good. All right, let's put it in perspective. We're not going to
year after year.
The other thing about Bernard Gilkey, a little pop, what is it? Pop history, pop culture, started a movie. Do you remember which movie it was?
Bernard Gilkey.
Cameo. I shouldn't say star. He had a cameo.
Wow. I'm just going to say Little Big League.
Well, that was a good movie too, by the way.
Great movie.
Not it. By the way, so 2 fun facts.
Was he at your house too, or what?
No. I wasn't cool enough. Remember, I was usually not allowed out of the house after 8:00. But no, I joke. But I just didn't want to go out of the house after 8:00. But no. Let's go with the Gilkey tidbit. Bernard was in Men in Black. He was in the original Men in Black. Toward the end, there's a scene where
he's on the field, right?
He's on the field
in the spaceship or whatever. His eyes are like bugging out. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, get that money, brother.
Yeah, he got that cash. I wonder if he still gets royalties off that.
I'm sure he did. He probably had a great agent.
The other piece was that in the Little Big League, the mom is the mom of the Mets draft pick from last year, Pete Crow Armstrong. So
really,
did you not know that?
If I did, I forgot it. Missed the pandemic. That's all I can tell you. Wow. Dropping facts. We're gonna have to pass around a follow-up sheet from this podcast with all of Ray's fun facts that he dropped in this episode.
Not going to go through all the other signings. Not spend too much time because there's really not too much notable in here. Although I will say we fast forward to March 17th, where the New York Mets acquire Roberto Pettigini.
Pettigini,
I remember Roberto Pettigini. I don't know if you do.
I do not. I know the name. I want to know why I know the name. Now, tell me why I remember that name.
He was just, he was Bronier's backup. He was a big dude. He was left-handed. He just had this sense that if he could just put all the pieces together, he could be something. Just never really panned out.
No, he looks like a solid big league player, but alas.
That's usually where it goes.
Only the strong survive here.
But Pettigini was acquired for Pete Walker. And I'll share another story because this is a story day. Now you know why I wanted to talk about this and this offseason so much.
Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Walker, junior year of college, I interned for the New Haven Ravens, who are the AA affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays. We might have to do an episode one day of how JonnyIce got on the field thanks to some connections and embarrassed himself.
First time and last time.
First and last, embarrassed himself with Ant in front of like 7 people.
That makes it worse, by the way, but we'll discuss that at a later date.
Hopefully that total audience doesn't exceed the number of podcast listens that we get, because that would actually be worse. But Pete Walker. Scott Walker's the guy. I think he's a bad politician if I remember right. But Pete Walker was on a rehab assignment for the Toronto Blue Jays. So, pitched a game, and I got an opportunity to interview him for our website. So as a, 20-year-old intern, it was the coolest thing to me. It was like the first professional player I ever interviewed. And not the last, ladies and gentlemen, let the record show, not the last. And
he had a Mets background
So there it is, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
It all comes back. That's Pete Walker. Who I think, actually had a solid career as a coach, was a bullpen and a pitching coach for the Toronto Blue Jays. He might still be in the Blue Jays system. Not entirely sure, but there is the Pete Walker, Rey Ordenez, New York Met connection, John.
And thank you for that. I love it. Go.
I told you, random facts.
Wow, this 96 is really rounding out to be something.
You really want to make it something. Here we go. Fast forward to March 26, 1996. The Mets purchased Joe Crawford from the Boston Red Sox after they had lost him earlier in the offseason. They must really wanted him.
That's called Rule 5 and buy. That's it. Bring him back around.
2 days later, the New York Mets signed Ricky Trellicek as a free agent. And I was kind of scratching my head. Why does this name mean something? He was a Met later on. He somehow, some way went to the Boston Red Sox, and then Mets traded sidearm reliever. Oh my God, his name's slipping Toby Borland, and they reacquired Ricky Trellicek from the Boston Red Sox.
He must have had some sort of incriminating evidence or something on Mr. McIlvaine, because I don't know why they brought him back. But he was not long for that world either.
Not long for that world. We get to the late March. That's typically where spring training, was breaking up. And I do remember this vividly. For whatever reason, the Mets had a gap in their starting rotation. You could tell after their spring training. I can't remember if someone got injured or wasn't going to be ready, so they needed some veteran, someone that was going to eat innings. And the Mets made a trade and acquired Mark Clark from the Cleveland Indians for...
Ryan Thompson was part of that deal. Reed Cornelius and Ryan Thompson, but there's a lot more Mets background, trades and et cetera with Ryan Thompson than, talking about the Blue Jays before. That's our friend Ryan Thompson. I believe he came from the Blue Jays.
He did. He was part of the David Cohn trade.
That's right.
We traded David Cohn for Jeff Kent and Ryan Thompson.
That's right. Yes, and Jeff Kent we'll get to a little later on in the season.
96, baby. It is coming full circle.
But I feel like Ryan Thompson overall was a pretty big disappointment for the Mets. He was probably a prospect when they traded for him from Toronto, and here we are, only to get David Cohn back, another 10 years later or so.
Which we couldn't do a podcast on because you were there for his last start.
I was there for, I think, his last strikeout of Vladimir Guerrero on a 62-mile-an-hour curveball with the bases loaded. See, I pay attention to.
Oh, that's fantastic. Reed Cornelius was another player that, just never panned out. If we rewind to the 95 real quick, I mean, the Mets made a lot of trades to get prospects. That's where they acquired Alex Ochoa for Bobby Bonilla. They got Damon Buford in that same deal. Damon never panned out, but so several prospects were acquired. Reed Cornelius came to us from David Segui, from the David Segui trade in the Montreal system. And so again, Reed was supposed to be, let's say, a number 4, number 5 starter, swing man, just never panned out. Mark Clark had a good 96 though.
Yeah, and you bring up David Segui. That's like, again, we have this carousel at positions, and you want to talk about like our first baseman, and it's like I forgot David Segui. Like, wow, it's 1 or 2 years and out for some of these positions.
It's crazy. Now, Mark Clark, one of my favorite Mark Clark stories is, I think he's like, I don't want to say the first pitcher because I definitely saw Doc do it a couple of times, but one of the first pitchers I've seen hit a home run. So there's that, ladies and gentlemen.
That was super rare back then too. Nowadays, these guys are all crazy athletes and, again, preoccupied with launch angles and things like that. But back then, I mean, a pitcher would choke up and stand there for 3 strikes if they had to, just to not mess up any rally.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing about Mark Clark, before we move on, is that he too was part of that Turk Wendell trade. So,
hey, thanks for coming then. If you're bringing back Turk, happy to have you around, Mark.
I mean, the thing that's funny also is like Turk wasn't even the centerpiece of that deal. It was Mel Rojas. We were going to fix Mel Rojas. We're going to do an episode on like closers that just never panned out, worst relievers in Mets history.
We're definitely going to do a relievers and an episode on how I was hoping that was Cookie Rojas and like Mel Rojas. He's a more legendary Met than Mel Rojas, that's for sure.
So we get to April, the season starts. In theory, we should stop there, but there are 2 acquisitions that are made in the month of April that don't necessarily pan out immediately, but play an important part in our future. John, do you want to talk a little bit about both of them?
Yeah, well, we brought in Matt Franco from the Chicago Cubs, and for a player to be named later, who I checked in on, and it was nothing to Chris DeWitt, who nothing really to talk about there. But Matt Franco was a very serviceable pinch hitter over the years for the Mets, and on that 99 2000 era team. And again, it's just a sign of how different things were between our speed guys and the pinch hitter role. Whereas we roll into the future of baseball, I think it's inevitable that we're going to have the DH across the board, and guys like Matt Franco, probably would be a full-time DH or something like that. But it's just a very different game, and the priorities were so different back then, building a team 25 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I just find it interesting how it's such a, let's call it under the radar. I mean, this guy was Kurt Russell's nephew, by the way. Let's not forget about that.
Shout out to some sort of recap I found. There he is. And recently, Anthony DiComo, shout out to Anthony DiComo, a loyal listener to this podcast, without a doubt. He named the top 5 bench players on the Mets of all time.
Oh, that's an interesting list.
And Matt Franco was number 5. Which to me, I was surprised about, but good for him. Works out for this episode. And it also segues us to the number 4 guy on the all-time Mets bench player list is Endy Chavez, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. Endy Chavez. How does you may ask, what does 1996 have to do with Endy Chavez and the Mets? Well, Ray, tell him why. Tell him what it has to do with Endy Chavez.
Well, I mean, he was, what he was drafted, right? I mean,
we brought him in.
We brought him
from
in.
Venezuela, right? Why not?
Welcome to the team, baby. Welcome to the team. Welcome to the farm. I have a feeling Omar Minaya had something to do with that. That's just me, because Omar just always had an eye, for talent, especially in the Latin American countries.
And we all are very familiar with Endy Chavez because of his run about 10 years later with the Mets. But he ended up playing in the minors and was taken, he was left unprotected. So whatever Omar did there, he did not notify his colleagues, but he was left unprotected for the Rule 5 draft, and the Royals picked him up and eventually made his big league debut in 2001. So it took him a little time to make his big league debut, and then again ended up back with the Mets in 2006 and was a excellent defensive replacement, pinch runner, pinch hitter, and then
very
catch.
Underrated. Yes.
Then there is the catch that lives in infamy.
Perez deals. Fastball hit in the air to left field. That's deep. Back goes Chavez back near the wall, leaping, and he made the catch. He took a home run away from Roland, trying to get back to first Edmonds. He's doubled off, and the inning is over. Endy Chavez saved the day. He reached high over the left field wall, right in front of the Mets in the visitors' bullpen, and pulled back a 2-run homer. He went to the apex of his leap and caught it in the webbing of his glove with his elbow up above the fence. A miraculous play by Endy Chavez.
It does. I don't know if we'll ever do an episode on that, though, because I can't relive it. I can relive the catch. I just can't relive the game.
The catch I can relive. I remember standing and running up the steps after he caught the ball, and I have never run up the steps for anything. And that catch by Endy Chavez. And I would urge all of our listeners to track down the Gary Cohn version of that call, because Joe Buck does not do it justice. The passion is not there like it is for long-time, lifelong Met fan Gary Cohn.
Absolutely. So that pretty much does let's call it the quote unquote off season. However, there are two deals that happened in 96 that I do want to cover. So we're going to take a little bit of a detour because these are pretty important. Let's call them acquisitions. The first one is the draft. When you get to June, the New York Mets draft pitcher Ed Yarnell in the 3rd round. Now, that may not sound like a big name. That may not even sound like it's someone important because, frankly, person never pitched for the Mets, but Ed Yarnell was part of the Mike Piazza deal 2 years later. So there's that.
I was glad we brought him in then. Happy to have you here, Ed.
And then we get to July 29th. I can't believe I'm going to say this. Let's see. We've done 3 episodes. For the second time, we're going to introduce the name Jose Vizcaino. And for the second time, we're going to introduce the name Carlos Baerga.
That's right. On July 29th, 1996, traded Jeff Kent and Jose Vizcaino to the Cleveland Indians for Carlos Baerga and Alvaro Espinosa.
Building for the future, baby. Building for the future. I will say this, look at another quick little side note here. And again, this could be another podcast episode someday, but, speaking of my grandfather again, the day that deal was made, I think it was I want to say it was the next day. The Mets played a doubleheader. I was with my grandfather in Brooklyn, spending the summer, some time with him in the summer, that sort of thing. And we really were like on the brink of getting in the car to drive to Shea Stadium so that we could see Carlos Baerga's first game, and get 2 games for the price of 1. Back then you could do that. We did not go. We watched it at home instead. But nonetheless, whenever I see that name, it just brings back memories to that trade day.
Well, Baerga was an absolute superstar then. So the excitement was warranted at the time. Just, unfortunately you were so young and naive at the time and didn't realize what would happen. Yes. I just remember being annoyed about Alvaro Espinosa because I'm like, that guy is a Yankee and he will always be a Yankee with his glasses or his, sports specs or whatever he had on. He's a Yankee. But
I did see that year. I saw Alvaro Espinosa hit a home run. It was it was one of the last games of the season. It was actually the day Mookie Wilson got inducted to the Mets Hall of Fame. Alvaro Espinosa hit a home run. I was there.
Well, he had 4 home runs and 144 at bats in 1996. So consider that rare.
I was there, baby.
You saw what most didn't.
Very last thing too, before we kind of put a bow on this episode is in 96, their rookie year, not a signing from the offseason, but it was the first year of shortstop Rey Ordenez's career, which again, when you talk about building the foundation for the future, Rey was a big part of that. And I still think if he didn't break his arm in 2000, he makes that catch, not Mike Bordick. That little single from Lee Soho up the middle, rap bastard.
I was a huge Ordonez fan, but let me ask you: do you think a solid 210 hitter defensive wizard would last these days in the league, or no? Do you think that's something? I
think so. You know what? I do think so. If the DH comes into play, then I absolutely think that a 210 player with like a WAR of 12. I don't even know what WAR stands for to this day.
Wins over Rey, I think. Okay. Wins above Rey.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I absolutely think so. I mean, all you have to do is look at last year's Mets squad to know that defense really does matter.
Yeah. And you take some of those things, one of the things that technology brought us is kind of like if that ball would have been a hit if somebody else was playing, and you learn what a solid up the middle defense would bring you and how many hits or whatever runs it would save by having guys with, better ranges and things like that.
Absolutely. So John, before we, kind of wrap up the this episode, I did want to share with you, I have the 1996 New York Mets yearbook.
Oh, he's there. He's holding it up, folks. It exists.
Look at this. Like in the very back, they're selling Budweiser. I don't think you could do that today.
Mets fans, this Bud's for you.
So let's pick a random page. First of all, very interesting to note that this is the 10th year anniversary of the 86 Mets. It's pretty funny that, that is our only claim, because every 10 years we're celebrating this team. Which, by the way,
sometimes we break it down to 5, by the way. Sometimes we bring it to like the 27 year or something like that.
Whatever it takes to put asses in
every year. We have Bobby Bonilla Day, and we have something with the 1986 team every year.
That's fantastic. That is so true. So what do you say? I just pick a number.
Page 11, baby. Page 11.
Page 11. Let's see what's on page 11 here. I'm really interested here. Hold on. Let's see. There's an ad for a mini tower desktop. Anyone that's interested in that. On page 11, it's only fitting, John.
Is that Dallas Green?
It is Dallas Green's bio.
And Dallas Green.
And you actually told me you wanted to talk about Dallas Green. So I yield the field to you, because there's some quotes that you wanted to read.
Thank you, gentlemen from Connecticut.
A reading from JonnyIce.
I tell you, I was just curious what went on during the 1996 season, and the firing of Dallas Green was one of the things. And I found an LA Times story, and it's interesting because Joe McIlvaine's quoted, and they, I think nowadays they wouldn't be as bold in their quotes. Joe McIlvaine, since spring training, we haven't done as well as anticipated. And then again, the article goes on to talk about, our Generation K not really panning out. And it says last week, Green, 62, lashed out at Wilson, that's Paul Wilson, and Isringhausen, saying they didn't belong in the majors. Those comments, McIlvaine said, contributed to Green's firing. Last week, in the midst of a dismal 2-7 West Coast trip, which is always a thing. There's always something that happens
the West Coast.
After a bad West Coast. You get off the plane and somebody gets fired.
Just ask Willie. I was just
exactly. You get off the plane and the black car is waiting for you. So after this horrible road trip, Green criticized Wilson, a former number 1 draft pick, and Isringhausen, who was 9-2 last year, as aforementioned. The 23-year-old pitchers are combined 9-23. Good God.
Well, they battled. You could see that they're maturing over here.
So I'm just going to give Green a random accent because I don't know what it is. I'm going to give him these guys really don't belong in the big leagues, Green said. It sounds very harsh and very negative, but what have they done to get here? I mean, I love this guy. I just hated him, but I love him. McIlvaine, who said he made the decision to dismiss Green in the middle of last week, said he didn't like that comment. It was a factor.
The nail. Oh my God. One thing that I remember about Dallas Green, I mean, and look, like you said, he's no longer with us, and he's a character. And I mean, World Series champion, so you can't take that away from him. One press conference, after game, post game, you know, he's talking to the reporters and he just cracks open a Budweiser and is, you know, drinking it. And I remember me looking at my dad like, can you do that? You know, like I'd never seen that. And you fast forward to today where you got the podium and there's water and there's, you know, Gatorade bottle. No, he was in his office cracking open a nice Bud Heavy.
That's when role models were role models, you know, nowadays.
And men were men, damn it.
Men were men. Crack one open. Oh, man. That's amazing.
All right, JonnyIce. So I guess that pretty much, there's not much more to say about this offseason or this team, but I had fun. This was a blast.
It's a good time, you know. If my memory was as vivid as yours for '96, you know, I'm gonna get you back for that. Maybe we'll do something a little more contemporary. But I'm impressed with 14-year-old Ray remembering all these things. So if anybody questions the Mets fandom of my partner here, check yourself.
All right, my friends. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. You know what to do. You can leave us feedback, subscribe to this podcast, hit us up on Twitter. I'm Ray at RH1782 on Twitter and Instagram. He's JonnyIce at JonnyIce on Twitter and Johnny Hielo on Instagram. That's ice in Spanish. John, anything you want to say?
Well, you know. I just wanted to get in before we go.
Yes.
I'm pausing the break. Before we go and once we sort out all the paid advertisers that are lining up for this podcast, just wanted to get a quick shout out to our post-production audio visual extraordinaire, KCP. If he doesn't like the shout out, all you'll hear before that is probably but he's awesome. He's doing a great job. So figured we should give him a little love on the podcast.
Now you're giving him a big hat, man. You know, at the dinner table, the next family event, he's going to just be talking all about how great it is.
Our per minute rate just went up with Casey. That's all I know.
All right, folks, have a good one. Talk to you soon. JonnyIce, what do you have to say?
Drive home safe, everybody.